So you're making the jump to the cloud. That's a big move, but then comes the big question. What in the world are we going to do with all our user accounts? Well, today, we're pulling back the curtain on Microsoft Entra ID. We're going to break down the absolute essentials, the core building blocks you need to get your head around to build a secure, modern identity system for the cloud. Think about it. Your entire organization is heading to the cloud. It's exciting, it's the future, but what happens to the most critical piece of the puzzle? Your users' identities. How do you control who gets in and what they can do once they're there? This is the fundamental challenge, and it's exactly what Microsoft Entra ID was built to solve.
All right, let's start right at the beginning. In this first section, we're going to talk about how Entra ID is a totally different beast compared to the traditional on-premises Active Directory that you're probably used to. It's a real shift in mindset. Okay, this slide really nails the difference. Imagine your old on-prem Active Directory is like a traditional office building, with a very strict hierarchy of floors and departments. We call those organizational units, or OUs. Microsoft Entra ID, on the other hand, is like a brand new, gleaming, cloud-native skyscraper. It's a software-as-a-service model, so it just gets rid of all that complex, rigid stuff like OUs and computer objects. Instead, it has a much flatter, way more flexible structure. And this is so important because modern cloud apps, they just don't care about those old hierarchies. They need a dynamic way to grant access based on things like who a user is and what groups they're in, which is exactly what Entra is designed for.
Okay, so we've got our shiny new cloud skyscraper. Now we've got to figure out who actually gets to come inside. So in this next part, let's look at the two most fundamental building blocks of any identity system, users and groups.
In our digital office, you've basically got two kinds of people walking around. First, you've got your member users. Just think of these as your full-time employees. An admin creates their account, gives them a company ID card, and they've got their standard access. And then you have guest users. These are your visitors, your contractors, your external partners. They get a temporary pass, and a lot of the time that pass gets created automatically when an employee shares a file or invites them to a team. It's a really simple but super effective way to separate your internal folks from your external collaborators.
And just like any real office, people work together in teams. Entra ID gives us two main ways to group them up. First up are security groups. These are like your classic departments. Think sales, finance, HR. Their one and only job is to control access. If you're in the finance security group, you get access to the finance files. Simple. And they are not mail-enabled. Then you've got Microsoft 365 groups. These are your modern dynamic project teams. They're built from the ground up for collaboration in services like Teams and SharePoint. And a key difference? They are mail-enabled, so they act as both an access group and a handy email distribution list.
So we know who's in our building and what teams they're on, but what can they actually do? This is where roles come in. I like to think of roles as the key cards. They determine exactly which doors each person is allowed to open. The hierarchy here is pretty straightforward. Way up at the top, you've got the global administrator. This role is basically the master key. It opens every single door in the entire building. Use it wisely. Below that, you have limited administrators. They get keys, but only for specific floors or areas. And then at the base level, you've got the standard user. Their key card just gets them through the front door and not much else. The big idea here, and it's a crucial one, is the principle of least privilege. You only give people the keys they absolutely need to do their job, and nothing more.
And this is where things get really powerful. That limited administrator level isn't just one role. It's a whole bunch of really specific jobs. This means you can delegate permissions with pinpoint accuracy. For example, you can make someone an Exchange administrator to manage email, or you can give someone the much simpler job of being a password administrator so they can just help out with forgotten passwords. You don't have to hand over the master key every time a small task needs doing.
Now, this all sounds fantastic if you're a brand new company starting fresh in the cloud. But what about, the rest of us? What if you've got years, maybe decades, of user identities already living in your on-premises Active Directory? How do you build that bridge from the old headquarters to the new cloud skyscraper?
The answer is a tool called Microsoft Entra Connect. This is the official, purpose-built solution for this exact scenario. Honestly, the best way to picture it is as a secure, automated shuttle bus. It runs on a regular schedule, picking up all your user identities from your on-prem building and safely driving them over to your new Entra ID office in the cloud, making sure everything stays perfectly in sync along the way.
So, what's this shuttle bus actually doing on its route? Well, it's managing the whole life cycle of an identity. When a new employee starts and gets an account on premises, that new account gets added to the cloud. If someone's job title changes on-prem, that attribute gets modified in the cloud. And of course, if an employee leaves and their account is deleted or disabled on-prem, that exact same change happens in Entra ID. This setup makes your on-prem directory the one source of truth, with all the changes flowing in one direction up to the cloud.
Okay, we're almost there. Our users have made the trip. Their identities now live and breathe in the cloud. But now we have to tackle the final and maybe the most important question of all. How do they actually sign in? When they walk up to the front desk of the cloud, how do they prove they are who they say they are?
This table breaks down your main options. First, you could make everyone have a separate password for the cloud. Let's be honest, that's confusing and a bad user experience. A much better choice is password sync. This takes a cryptographic version of your user's password, it's called a hash, not the password itself, and syncs it to the cloud. So users have the same password, but they're still going to get prompted to type it in. But the real endgame for most of us is that seamless single sign-on, or SSO. That's where pass-through and federated authentication come in. They both pass the sign-in request back to your on-prem systems, so users log in once to their machine in the morning and they are good to go for everything. The key difference is that pass-through is simpler. It uses a lightweight agent, while federation requires a more complex service setup, like ADFS. And the source material really drives this home, saying that pass-through authentication gives you true SSO because users don't receive multiple prompts. And that's really what it's all about. For your users, the experience is just invisible. It's seamless. They log into their work computer, and their cloud apps just work. That's the kind of modern experience we're all aiming for.
So there you have it. We've laid out all the pieces on the table. The modern skyscraper that is Entra ID, the users and groups who live inside, the role-based keycards that control access, the Entra Connect shuttle bus that brings everyone over, and the different ways to work the front desk with authentication. You now have all the fundamental building blocks. So the only question left is, how are you going to design your cloud identity strategy?